In the world of Toy Story, do you think the toys would step in if there was a home invader? Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'd like to sit back in a very squeaky chair, relax, and have a conversation with all of you about the reserved list. Specifically, I want to ask the question, is the reserved list still relevant to Magic the Gathering these days? And would the reserved list even matter in the event of a Magic the Gathering game death? Yeah, those are some pretty heavy questions I think that we should probably talk about. But before we get into that, there are definitely some of you out there who don't even know what the reserved list is. And that's because it feels like it does not come up all that often anymore. When discussing Magic the Gathering Finance, the last time the reserved list was really mentioned by a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers especially, was during the whole Magic 30 debacle when Wizards of the Coast really made a big old oopsie and tried to sell $1,000 Magic the Gathering 4-pack boxes. That did not go out well for them, and it caused a huge stir and a huge commotion, and did not get the best reception by the community. But I digress. The reserved list was a promise Wizards of the Coast made a very long time ago, back in 1995 or 96, I want to say, where they basically put out a statement saying that they were no longer going to reprint rare cards from a certain selection of rare cards from Magic the Gathering sets going forward. This was done because with the release of the Chronicles and 4th edition expansions, Wizards of the Coast had reprinted a lot of cards that were at the time considered very valuable, highly collectible, etc. And collectors had believed that their collections were now worthless because of these reprints, so there was a huge outcry, and this led to Wizards of the Coast having kind of a knee-jerk reaction going, all right, here is a list of cards that going forward we are not going to reprint, and we will add cards to this list going forward so you will know that your collection will not be tampered with by Wizards of the Coast, and you can rest assured that your card's secondary market value, the collectible value of your cards, is going to remain high, or higher potentially, I should say. Now, throughout the years, the reserved list has had very few changes. There have been updates to it, cards have been added to it, and on 2 occasions, I think, cards were even taken off of it. And there's been a few controversies with it over the years. My mouth decides to work sometimes. There's been some controversies, such as a handful of reserved list cards like Karn and Phyrexian Negator, I think is the one, getting foil reprints because Wizards tried to argue that foil cards, the special premium foils, were not part of the original agreement. There was some backlash, so they decided to go, okay, it's for foils too. And some other stuff too. They like I said, they've taken some stuff off. I think Demonic Tutor was originally on the list. They took it off. Good call there, because that's a really good card, and I'm glad to have a copy. But yeah, nowadays, the reserve list is something that's almost 30 years old. All of the cards on that list are either extremely old and extremely expensive, regardless, or they're extremely old and kind of forgotten. And these days, if you're looking at Magic the Gathering Finance, Magic the Gathering collectability and such, you'd hardly even notice the reserved list at all when it comes to looking up, what cards to collect, etc. Just because, especially for a lot of these older sets, everything kind of feels like it blends together. But once upon a time, the reserved list was seen as this kind of backbone of the entire Magic the Gathering secondary market, where a lot of people had confidence in Magic as a collectible and investment because these reserved list cards had that promise to them that they would not be reprinted, that they could not be devalued, in essence, by Wizards of the Coast. And that did lead to a lot of confidence in them as a investment, as some would say. And understandably so. I mean, if you had, part of the lacking faith in the US dollar, for instance, is the fact that it is something that experiences inflation, therefore the dollar is devalued by printing more dollars. If you have a promise from the company that they're not going to devalue your cards by printing more of them, that gives you a bit of confidence in them as an investment. So it's easy to see where that idea comes from, that these are worth investing in. But the truth is a bit more complicated than that. You see, while it's true that the reserve list does contain cards that will not be reprinted, that doesn't mean every card on the reserve list is worth really evaluating as a serious investment, just because either A, they aren't that great as a card, B, there's a real, like a sheer volume of them, or C, they're just undesired for some other reason. Like, there's a bunch of cards on the reserve list from later Magic the Gathering sets that just have so many copies of them out there on the market that it would be infeasible to collect them. There are several cards on the reserve list that are just so bad that expecting people to want them would be infeasible. And then there are just some cards that, while they are worth more than the bargain bin reserve list cards, let's call them, they are a bit more desirable. The chances of them exploding in value to be comparable to like dual lands or something like that is unlikely. They're, $20, $30 cards. That's cool and all, but they're never going to be like, well, unlikely to be a $400, $500, $600 card. Okay? Let's put that out there. So with all that said, nowadays, the reserved list, while people are still aware of it, there are still serious collectors who throw a lot of money at it still, just because they do want to have these old vintage Magic the Gathering cards that will become a shrinking market over time. There is this big question out there of, does the reserved list matter in a world where new Magic the Gathering sets really do seem to be dragging a lot of the attention? And I'm not just talking about Final Fantasy, which was insanely very successful. I'm not just talking about Lord of the Rings. I'm not talking about Avatar, Mutant Ninja Turtles, because there are a lot of universes beyond sets that are dragging a lot of attention, not just from Magic fans, but from these third-party IP fans who are only in the game for this one set. I'm even talking about modern Magic the Gathering sets that are actually Magic the Gathering, which have a lot of focus and attention on them, both from the cards in the set and from the collector booster boxes themselves, which are getting a lot of attention. And there's a few reasons for this. One, the game is just larger. Obviously, larger player base means larger focus on the newer products, means more of those products being bought, sold, etc. That doesn't need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. Two, the sales pitch gimmicks that these sets have, such as the serialized cards, all the extra arts and stuff. While some people aren't a huge fan of those gimmicks, other people are absolutely blown away by them and want to get as many of those serialized cards, for instance, as they can. That's understandable. So there's a lot of focus on a lot of the newer Magic sets and a lot of the older Magic sets, a lot of the vintage and classical Magic sets are kind of overlooked in the modern day. And you can actually see this if you go to any of the, name a website that tracks box prices and single prices for a Magic the Gathering in general, and you'll see that, especially in comparison to certain recent sets, a lot of vintage Magic has been a slow crawl laterally, or even in some cases small dipping downward as money is pulled out of them to get into the new shiny hotness. And as more and more attention is given to new Magic, whether for good or bad, because we've had extremely successful new Magic products, and then we've had some that people are declaring to be the worst sets of all time, somehow, regardless of if the attention is good or bad, there's still a lot of attention on the newer stuff, and that attention is being pulled away from the old stuff. Now, there are definitely people, I'm not trying to say that nobody's out there buying the reserve list. There's definitely people who are looking at this time frame that we're in, and they're seeing that there's not a lot of attention on the reserve list, and they're going and buying up their place and their bets on the reserve list. They're saying they're looking at these older cards that have not had a lot of focus since, I would say, the COVID era, really. when there was a lot of people buying up reserve list cards during COVID. They're looking at this kind of slow crawl as a nice buying opportunity. No, there's got to be a word for long window of market stagnation. There's got to be like a good word for that I just don't know. I should get a thesaurus. If this video gets 10 billion likes, I will buy a thesaurus so that I can flip through it and give fancy words on the channel. But yeah, there are people buying older reserve list cards. It's just that it's not a huge focus of Magic the Gathering investors, collectors, speculators, all that stuff. And a lot of people aren't even talking about the reserve list. And that, I think, is a bit of a shame. Because in the event, okay, in either scenario of Magic's immediate future, either Magic goes on for another 30 years or it dies because of some reason in the next 2 weeks, 2 more weeks, and then Magic's definitely dead. In either scenario, I think there is still room for the reserved list in the hearts and binders of Magic the Gathering collectors, investors, whatever have you. In the event that Magic the Gathering goes on forever, as the game grows and more people get into the game, if that happens, then the available pool of reserved list cards, especially the better reserved list cards, we're talking Power 9, Dual Lands. I should have memorized like 30 cards from Fallen Empire so I could give a meme one. Mesmeric Trance, there we go. If as the game grows and as the player base grows, the amount of dual lands per person decreases dramatically, especially when you take into account individuals buying more than one for either collection purposes, investment purposes, whatever, and taking them off the market, sometimes for years at a time. That pool of reserve list cards in an environment where the game player base is growing and the game is continuing to do good, it's only going to get smaller, which means I personally think that there is still room to talk about the reserve list and get excited about it. Meanwhile, in a worst case scenario situation where Magic the Gathering dies, boom, dead, shot, Wizards of the Coast finally killed it, right? Mark Rosewater finally accomplished his dream of putting the game 6 feet under, right? In that situation, I think while 99.9% of every Magic card will instantly lose value, I do think it is the reserve list cards, similar vintage cards, as well as the most desirable top 1% of modern cards. I think those are what will retain value. Yes, I believe serialized Magic cards in the event of Magic's death, I do believe that those would retain value. I also believe that vintage Magic the Gathering cards, especially the reserved list, Dual Lands, Power 9, etc., I believe that those will retain a lot of their value. Not all of it. $1,000 Magic card might go down to $500, $600, $400, whatever. But I don't think they're all going to go to zero. Shocklands, I think that those would go to zero in a situation where Magic the Gathering dies tomorrow. They've had a bazillion printings. Fetchlands also might go pretty low. Full art basics, zero, right? That's my belief. In a world where Magic the Gathering's dead and 95% of the player base is left, I do think most Magic the Gathering cards will go to prices that not actually at zero. When I say they're going to zero, I don't mean they're actually going to go to zero. I just mean that they're going to be so cheap that who's going to really care? A shock land for like $3 on eBay is effectively zero. But I digress. In either situation, I should edit these videos so that there's like a huge asterisk every time I say something, and then at the end of the video try to clarify everything I say. That'd be a nice idea. I should do that as like a April Fool's video next year. That'd be fun. But yeah, regardless of Magic's future, I think there's room there for reserve list cards, and regardless of what Magic's doing right now, I also think that there's a lot of excitement still to be had with the reserve list, which is why I feel it's kind of a shame that, not a lot of people talk about it, not a lot of people get excited about it or collect it or anything. And I'm definitely a hypocrite in that regards, because, I'm only even talking about this because earlier today I was looking through my handful of slabbed cards, looking at my Sliver Queen and going, You know, I should probably get more of these. I should probably get more reserve list Sliver Queens, because I do love that card quite a lot. It's my favorite card in the game, and I would be remiss to not have even more of them. Her. Queen. Yeah. But still, this video is just me saying, hey guys, the reserve list still exists. And you guys should definitely buy it all, because I have thousands and thousands of, I don't know, I have thousands of Black Lotuses, and I need you guys to buy them so I can make money. Does that sound believable? I don't think so. I tried, right? Anyway, I just think the reserve list is kind of cool, and I think it's a shame that a lot of people seem to have forgotten about it entirely, especially in the wake of Spider-Man, Avatar, TMNT, and Final Fantasy. That's all I got for you kids today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below if you think I'm right or if you think I'm just a crazy uncle. Either way, I appreciate you guys hanging out. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.